When Charlie Kirk died, did he go to heaven or did he go to hell? What exactly happened to his soul? My name is Nicole Guillaume. I'm a psychic medium. I connect with the dead to bring answers and guidance to the living. Charlie Kirk was a well-known personality, and while he wasn't exactly a political figure, or a politician, I should say, he was treated and revered as one. And whether or not you agreed with Charlie's beliefs is outside of the scope of this. I will admit that I was not the biggest fan of Charlie, but honestly, I don't know a whole lot about him. So when he passed, I felt the same shock as most people. This was a man who was 31 years old. He was killed in front of his family and in front of people who really revered him. And the way that he passed was obviously violent and tragic. So with that being said, I want to walk you through what did happen to Charlie when he passed. For reasons that I don't completely understand, this information was downloaded to me just 2 or 3 days after he had crossed over. Now, I do want to say that typically when a celebrity or a well-known figure passes, I don't like to create videos about him. I don't want to jump on that bandwagon. I don't want to seem as if I am using their name or their likeness or anything like that to get more views. And with that said, I have also noticed that when I receive downloaded information out of nowhere, when I wasn't seeking it, looking for it, asking for it, it's usually because there's someone else who's been wondering that information, and I've been used as the channel. I've been used as the guide to receive that information and deliver it to you or whoever is interested. So I'm going to walk you through the timeline of his passing and his resurrection, if you will, into the other side, because as you probably know, when we cross over, when we pass away, our soul goes back to where our soul came from. So from the other side, maybe it does look like a resurrection. I don't know. However, we are going to walk through the timeline as best as I can from when he made that made his appearance back into the world of spirit. So at the time of Charlie's passing, he had a very interesting experience. His soul knew what was about to happen. And so before that bullet hit him, his soul stepped out. And the Charlie that may have remained for a few moments or minutes, I don't know how long he was alive when he was shot. I don't know how long it took him to cross over from that point. I haven't seen the video. I have no desire to watch the video. Like I said, I don't know a lot about this person. But I do know that his soul stepped out. And in that moment, he was grasping with basically 2 realities at the same time. There was the Charlie that was still in physical form, but there was the Charlie that was now in spirit that was kind of getting a 360 of everything that was happening. I see his spirit instantly going to his wife and his family, and I see him as a spirit looking at the stage, looking at his body struggling, and also being a little confused, yet also understanding what was happening at that point. I also see that as he's, as a spirit, looking at himself on the stage, I do see the figure of Jesus appearing for him on the, what would be, if I was looking at him on stage, I would see Jesus appearing on my right side of the stage. And I also see a family appearing for him. So I feel like I'm looking at someone who may have been like a brother to him. So someone who is appearing to also be in his 30s, and this person looks like they have a family as well. So I don't know who this person is in relationship to Charlie. Again, I don't know much about this person, about Charlie Kirk at all, but he did have a family members, I would assume, that came up for him. And Jesus did show up as well. And it seems like that was the moment that his soul realized that he had crossed over and that he wasn't coming back. So I do see him immediately approaching Jesus and just being in awe. And I see Charlie smiling, and I see this image of him being in this surrealness. Meanwhile, his body is still struggling. And so I see Charlie's spirit, his soul, looking at Jesus, and he says, my Lord, why have you forsaken me?" And he's saying this with a smile on his face. And then when he realizes what he just said, he feels confused, because that was just the first thing that came out of his mouth. But he really just wanted to acknowledge to Jesus that he was, I guess, excited to see him. And that was the first phrase that came out of his mouth, even though he definitely did not feel like Jesus had forsaken him. So Charlie was very, very happy to see Jesus. So Jesus was there. He did appear to assist Charlie in the crossing over. And Charlie did, of course, also acknowledge the other person, the family that was there. But his attention was on Jesus, right? Because Charlie felt as if he created his whole platform based on conservative family values that were based on the teachings and the word of Jesus Christ. That is how Charlie perceived himself in life. So Jesus did help him cross over, and I feel like the crossing over was actually pretty quick, but I do see that Charlie hesitated, because when Jesus turned around to start walking and essentially walking into the afterlife, walking into the world of spirit, I do see Charlie pausing, and he looks back, and he sees all the madness, and he sees his wife screaming, crying, like in shock in the crowd. He's also absorbing some of the emotions and just a lot of other things happening around him, but mostly he's focused on his wife and kids. And he says, "What about them?" And Jesus said, "They'll be fine." He placed his hand on Charlie's shoulder, and he said, "Follow me." So Charlie kind of reluctantly did cross over. There was some concern for his family, but since Jesus said they'll be okay, Charlie, I don't think he completely believed it, but he has faith, right? This is Jesus we're talking about. And so he did. He followed Jesus, and they crossed into the afterlife. From there, what I see is him and Charlie, him being Jesus and Charlie going for this very long walk in this area that is really mystical. I see there being a lot of clouds around them, and sometimes I do see like these different, I almost said villages, maybe they are villages, but I do see different, I guess you could say, environments forming, but then it's almost like they're back in this cloudy layer. So like I see a sort of park and a lake and a pond, but then I see them back in this cloudiness, this cloudy environment. And then I see them being by a house where I think Charlie must have grown up in, or he has some type of history there, because I see them talking about that. And as for the actual conversations that they had, I don't know. I can't see that. I can't hear it. It's obviously none of my business, and that's meant to be between the two of them. So they did have what was essentially a very, very long walk, because Charlie subscribed or prescribed or believed, however you want to phrase it, believed in a certain theology, and I guess you could even say brand of Christianity. He believed in judgment. And so when him and Jesus finished this long conversation that took days, like in the timeline that Charlie is now in, because as you know, timing works differently in spirit than it does here. So what can be days, weeks, or years might just be a few seconds or moments here. So this conversation that he had walking with Jesus went on for days. And at the end of it, Jesus told him, or he said something to him along the lines of, I can't make it out exactly, but something like, are you ready? Maybe that's all. Are you ready? And the meaning behind the "are you ready" was the understanding that Charlie was about to face judgment for his time on earth. And when I say judgment, that's not something harsh. It's probably how he would have termed judgment, as being something harsh, but it is the weighing of the scales. It is the discussion, I guess you could say, looking at your life and asking, how do you feel it went? Why did you do this? It's gathering the information. It's looking at the things that he did and looking at the cause and effect of everything. And so this isn't something that everyone faces. Like, they're not going to face judges for judgment when they cross over. But because that was a part that was central to his belief, his soul did carry some of that over. And so Charlie then faced judges. And it's interesting because in my mind's eye, in this level of consciousness, I see that he's in a room, and it's this very ornate courtroom. There's gold, there's jewels, and it's big and spacious sometimes, but then I also see like it's almost like it contracts and it becomes smaller. And I see that it's not like he's switching between two different rooms, but what I see is what essentially looks like two different rooms. And I see there being 3 main judges, but then sometimes there's as many as 5, maybe more, but all I can see is 5. And so during this judgment, what happens is they just start asking him questions about his life here on earth. Like I said earlier, how do you feel it went? What do you believe your purpose was while you were there? How did you interpret this? Why did you respond that way? So they're really just going over his life. And Charlie did feel as if he had to, I guess, defend himself and fight for his life, as it were. And what he didn't understand, and what I can clearly see, is he didn't understand that this was a construct based on his belief system. So once he got to the other side, he had to experience what it was that he was preaching that was waiting for other people on the other side. Does that make sense? So because he told people there is judgment, you will be judged, when he crossed over, that's the experience he had. Because sometimes on the other side, I want to say we get a taste of our own medicine. It's a terrible way to put it. And again, not everyone has that experience. But I guess when you have certain ideas that are very, very strong within you, then they do play out in the afterlife, more or less, so that you can get an understanding of the severity or the tone of what you were preaching, of what you were teaching. So I hope that made sense. So I see him talking and debating just like he used to do on earth. This time, instead of it being with kids on a college campus, he is talking to judges in the afterlife. And these judges are neutral, and these judges already know what he's going to say. They already know his personality. They're not actually there to judge him. It's more like they're playing a role for him so that he can have this experience. But to him, it's real. Like, it's almost like for them, this is pretend. For the judges, this is pretend. They are taking on the persona of judges. So again, he can have this experience, but to him, this is real, right? This is very important stuff. So he is debating, and I see him becoming almost kind of haughty, like we would see when he would debate essentially teens and young adults on colleges. Sometimes he would get on this power high. And I see him doing that before these judges as he's defending himself. But I do see there being almost a tinge of fear and a tinge of humility, but it's like he overrides that because he feels like he has to sway these judges in his favor. But he wasn't going to sway anybody because, again, they already knew how all of this was going to play out. So once that whole scenario is over, where he is essentially debating, defending, getting on this power high that he used to be on earth. And by the way, he was very comfortable in that power high. That's what he was used to. That was kind of his I want to say love language when he was on earth. That's what made him feel superior and gave him this sense of confidence and like I said, power. It was intoxicating for him. And he still had that sense of intoxication of feeling, powerful and high when he would get kind of haughty and he was defending and he was proud of himself, and he would try to argue with judges about conceptions and ideas and theologies that he believed in, that he followed, or he followed to the best of his ability, or he believed that he followed, even though sometimes he didn't, but he thought he did. He thought he did a good job. So with that, the judges do at least notice. And for some of you that are probably wondering, who are these judges? Like, if these aren't real judges, what's going on here? These are spirit guides, essentially. These are teachers. These are masters. And so they're taking on this role because this is part of his afterlife lessons. He is still learning. He has so many things that he needs to learn regarding the not just, I want to say the outcome of his life, but the influence he had on other people. There's so much that he's learning and going to have to learn in the other side now. So these master teachers tell him that they've heard his story, and they ask him one more time, how do you feel you did on earth? Do you feel like you brought more pain? Do you think you brought insight? Like, they're really trying to get him to think consciously about how he behaved on earth. And, in good old Charlie fashion, I see him being very, kind of haughty, I would say, and assertive. And, saying I brought millions to Christ. I had thousands of followers, millions of views. So he was going back to that. And I do see him saying, I loved my family. I loved my friends. And so he's trying to portray to the judges why he did a good job here. And so they smile at him, and they explain to him the life review process, which I think he already had heard a little bit about when he was alive, but he would have been really snide about it. So they explained to him the process of having to relive his experience, but as the people that he affected. So here's the thing. When I downloaded this information regarding where Charlie was in the afterlife and what he was up to and what was going on with his soul, because a lot of people do wonder, like, a lot of people assume he's in heaven, and other people assume he's in hell, and other people just, maybe they don't know, maybe they don't care. But there's people who believe that as soon as he died, he went to the pearly gates, he met Jesus, he's being honored by the apostles and angels and whatever. That is not the case. He is not a hero in heaven. I will tell you that right now. And then there's other people who think that he went straight to hell because he didn't get the teachings of Christ correct, and he taught and they believe that he taught a ideology and a theology based on scripture that was harmful to many. So they believe that he went straight to hell and he's being tormented by demons and fire. That didn't happen either. Where he is now, as far as what I can tell, is that he is in a space of consciousness. I see him basically in a room. So he's separate from everyone else in the spirit world right now. But of course, there's still master teachers and angels and spirit guides watching over him. So it's not like he's being hurt or anything. But he is having to live out the experiences of people that he interacted with, of people that he had some type of influence on. And he is going to be there for a very, very long time. So here's what I mean when I say that he is experiencing things from the people he interacted with. We all know that Charlie liked to go to campuses and debate liberals there. Actually, he would debate anyone, right? So he would debate these college campus kids, and he would resort a lot of times to name calling and laughing at them. Like, he wasn't nice. He was not nice. He did not fight fair. And you know, honestly, it's kind of sad, but anyways. So the experience he's having now is, let's say that there was a person, we're going to name him Brian. Let's say that in life, Charlie debated a young man by the name of Brian. And maybe Brian was talking to Charlie and asking him about his interpretation of a scripture regarding, let's say, the Beatitudes, right? That's what he's coming to. And he's saying, hey, you know, I hear you saying all this stuff, and yet Jesus said this, you know, it seems contradictory to me. And Charlie would go back to his mind games, his rhetoric, his chatter, and he would explain to that person why his understanding, why Brian's understanding of the Beatitudes is wrong. And he might revert to saying something like, well, in the Greek language, this word actually means this, and blah, blah, blah. And whether or not Charlie actually believed that, or he was saying that on the fly, I have no idea. A lot of times people would fact check Charlie afterwards and find that he got a lot of things wrong. But to be fair, that happens to a lot of debaters, right? So no judgment there. But he knew what he was doing, and he knew he was lying, and he knew he was making things up when that's what he was doing. So for this particular scenario, if he ever did talk to a guy named Brian, or even if he ever did, well, talk to a guy named Brian who confronted him on the Beatitudes, or Beatitudes, is that what it's called? I don't remember. It's been a while since I read them. Whether or not that has ever happened, I have no idea. I'm just using this as a made up scenario. So he would explain to Brian why he was somehow wrong in his interpretation, and why Charlie was justified in basically behaving in the exact opposite of what the Beatitudes say. And in this life review, Charlie would first see this as if it is outside of him. So he wouldn't experience it as a memory. He would see it more like it's on a screen, right? So he's seeing it play out. He's watching himself. He's watching this kid. And then next, what he would do is his consciousness would go into the consciousness. It would blend with the consciousness of this person. So now he is Brian. Now he is in physical form as Brian in that moment of time. And he is living that experience of not just that interaction with Charlie, but he's also understanding what Brian went through from possibly even the moment of conception, but basically definitely from the time he was a child. And so he is experiencing Brian's life. He is experiencing what happened when Brian was born, and Brian's mom was sick, and his dad was abusive and not very nice. And despite his mom being sick, his mom was always working so hard and almost behaved as if she was a single mom, because her husband was always just out doing whatever he wanted. He experienced Brian's life when Brian was 5 years old, and his parents separated, and Brian didn't understand why. He had to live Brian's experience when Brian was living with his dad, and his dad took off for 2 days, and Brian didn't know where his dad was, and Brian was running out of food, and the only thing he had to eat was cereal for 2 days until his mom came to pick him up. He had to live Brian's first heartache. He had to live Brian's life when Brian was in poverty and essentially alone and being bullied and picked on by kids that were once his friends. You know, because in my mind's eye, I see a scenario where Brian is in high school, and people who were his friends in elementary and even junior high are now making fun of him because Brian is tall, Brian is big. Brian has changed and now he's being bullied by the people that he used to hang out with. So he's starting to live Brian's experience, and he's understanding why Brian's empathy was so strong, and why Brian loved things like the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, and why he really held on to the words of Jesus, and how Brian, without a spotlight, without a podcast, was actually quietly making a difference in the world by volunteering, by being there for a friend or a stranger who really needed it. And so Charlie is experiencing all of this as Brian. And so now when he gets to that point where he is Brian debating with Charlie, and he is looking into his own eyes through the eyes of Brian, he is having that experience of what it was like to be laughed at, to be told he was wrong, to be called names. He is having that entire experience through the consciousness of Brian. And he is understanding the full spectrum of how his words, how his behavior, how this, I want to say the power high he would go on, but also it's like a lack of restraint, a lack of emotional maturity and this disgust for empathy. He's starting to see and feel and understand how it felt for people like Brian, and maybe even people like Dean Withers, and maybe even people like, I can't remember the other kid's name who used to debate him, but just the people that he interacted with. But it's not just that, it's the people he had some type of influence on. He also has the experience of a woman in her 20s who's listening to Charlie's podcast as she's driving, and she's crying because her parents kicked her out. She maybe lived in a small farm. She's listening to Charlie's podcast for inspiration because she's a Christian herself, and she's just had this horrible experience with her parents, and she's just feeling lost. And as she's listening to Charlie's podcast, he is saying things about women that maybe aren't very nice. Maybe he's talking about some type of role that women play that in this moment, even though she wants to be a good submissive Christian and she wants to submit herself to Christ and she would love to have a husband, all the things, she's in a place right now where in her spirit, she knows that may not happen for her. Because her life is difficult and you can't just put a bow on it and make it seem like everything's okay. She knows that she's maybe meant for something else. And her life is in turmoil. And right now she just needs help and inspiration. And instead she hears these words from Charlie that are anything but inspirational for her. And it makes her feel even more lost and even more ashamed, because the life that Charlie's saying she should have as a Christian, and what her goal should be, and how she should honor her mother and father and all those things, that's not what her life is through no fault of her own. It's what she actually desired but can't have. And so now he's also having to have that experience as this young woman who lived in a small farm, who is Christian, who is conservative, who's had this fight with her parents, who was kicked out, who has to figure things out, who wants to go to college and is probably going to go to college, but doesn't know how to make that happen. He has to have that experience as her and live that out as well. And it's not just those type of experiences, though. He's also having the experience of when he meets someone and he's in awe of them and he praises them. We'll come up with someone else. Let's talk about his wife. We'll use his wife as an example. There's no doubt that him and his wife had arguments, but they probably had, I'm sure that they had great times too. I mean, they were married for a while. So he's also living the experience that he had with her as her. So he is seeing himself through her eyes, and he's also realizing what she really thought of him at times, how his behavior affected her. He's looking back at the times when he was kind to her when she needed it, and how that made her feel safe and heard. And he's also experiencing the times when he wasn't there when she needed him. He's feeling all of this. So with his friends, with strangers, that's his life review. And because he was such a controversial but well-known figure who had an influence over so many lives, he's going to be in that review for a long time. And not just because of the amount of people that he interacted with and affected, but because every single soul, every single person on the planet is individual, unique, and precious. And that's where his lessons actually are. His lessons, his teaching, his soul's growth are in every single one of those people. So this isn't about punishment. This isn't about judgment. It's about true growth and understanding. And one of the things he seemed to kind of hate, which was empathy, because he talked about toxic empathy. And now he's having to have actual empathy because he's living life as these people. And each one of these souls has a deep and profound lesson that will stay with him, that will stay with his soul. So he's essentially in class where the only student is him. Now, what happens when he comes out of this life review, which is going to, again, last for years? I see him coming out of this, because I'm just tuning into a different state of his timeline. I see him coming out of this, and I see him being, I don't have words for the sensation that I have for him, but it's like this calm recognition and a reverence and an awe, not for himself, not for how he handled things, but for the strength, the vitality, the weakness, the shame, the entire life and lesson of all the individuals that he has now had the ability to essentially live through. And I also want to mention that his experience doesn't just stop at the interaction that he had with that person. He has to experience the aftermath of that as well. He has to, we'll go back to Brian and the example of Brian. So after they had that interaction with the Beatitudes and the debate and whatnot, when that debate was over, Charlie just moved on to the next person, right? He didn't care about Brian. He just moved on to the next person to debate. But Brian had an experience. He had a feeling, he had an emotion, he had a concept that he was trying to rationalize and make sense of, that he took with him. And essentially every experience we have with someone has the ability to change us in some way. And so now he has to live life as Brian and feel the after effects of that experience. And he has to, through Brian's consciousness, live those experiences where Brian was talking about his experience with Charlie and how that affected him. And he's going to also, or he did, have that experience of rereading the Beatitudes and rereading them in different translations and asking himself if Charlie was actually right. Brian asking if Charlie was actually right. And so he's going to have that experience. And in a weird way, that's a beautiful moment for both him and Brian, because if Brian had not had that exchange with Charlie, he wouldn't have dove even deeper into the Beatitudes, which maybe led to him becoming a pastor, which maybe led to him starting his own church, which maybe led to him doing boots on the ground mission. I don't know what that means. That was just channeled, boots on the ground missions, where this church is helping people who need it, not just in our country, but in others as well. And so that interaction was precious for a lot of reasons, even if it wasn't done in a way that was correct. But there might have been a part of Brian who was like, I need to protect people. I need to protect believers from people like Charlie. And I also have to up my game and understand these scriptures better so that if someone challenges my faith again or challenges the words of Christ, I will be prepared. And so that's what happened, right? So he's going to see the after effect. And I don't want to paint this as if Charlie had a positive effect on everyone he met. I don't think he did. I mean, I'm not going to get into that, but he's going to see the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, that were the after effects of interactions. So he's having that experience as well. So when he gets out of it, there's going to be this new reverence that he has for all of life, for the people he used to be disgusted by. And yes, that means that he is going to have to merge his consciousness and be in the body of the trans people that he may not have had a lot of respect for, from what I understand, but he's going to have to live their experience as well. He's going to see their life played out as them. He's going to be in their body. He's going to have that experience of arguing with Charlie as that trans person. So that's what's laid out for him. So he's going to come out of this with a greater reverence for life, because Charlie's soul became so enamored on earth and became so attached to this ego that even when he crossed over into the other side, this ego was so embedded in him. And we all keep our ego, but when we cross over, we tend to remember previous lives that we lived, and we notice mistakes that we had. There's just a different experience I think most people have when they cross over. And if you ever watch different NDE experiences on podcasts, YouTube, wherever, you'll know that isn't always a common theme, but it is something that pops up for some people when they cross over. But Charlie's identity, his ego, were so engraved in this character that he played on earth that he didn't have access after he crossed over to everything prior. And also because he's in this, I want to say, simulation or game where he is still learning, he had to have that experience of essentially having cosmic spiritual amnesia so he could play out the rest of this belief system that he adopted on earth. And he's also going to understand what his mission and purpose was on earth and how he got blindsided. Because one thing that is coming through that I see is that he did have a purpose. He did have a plan. We all do, but we also have free will when we get here. And so he allowed himself to be mesmerized and even hypnotized by power, by riches, by wealth. And he went against the core values and the experience and the kindness and other things that he essentially wanted to bring to earth when his soul incarnated. So I'm not going to say that was his fault, because when all of us get here to earth, we all forget our soul mission. It's written in our hearts, yes, but then we have this thing called consciousness and intuition, and of course our soul that guides us along the way. And so we have to pay attention to that guidance. And so our guidance system, our inner GPS, as we're flowing through life, will tell us, yes, this is right, no, this is wrong. And if we don't listen to that, which I haven't listened, I mean, I have been completely honest about that in some of my previous videos, and gosh, was there hell to pay all the times I didn't listen to my intuition. That is critical. That is important, especially when it comes to matters of empathy, kindness, compassion, but even allowing ourselves to be swayed by certain views and theologies and theories when we know that they are wrong, when we can feel in our soul that they are wrong, not because we subscribe to a certain dogma or theology. Like if there's Christians watching this, they might be really upset with me and say, no, I can feel that you're wrong. I know that you're wrong. But that's not really them talking. That's years of having been groomed to believe in a certain way. And I can already see the eye rolls and the sides like, ugh, can't believe she's saying this. You know, I have free will. I'm not brainwashed. You might be. Funny thing about people who are brainwashed is they don't know they're brainwashed. So I'm just going to leave that out there. Boop. Mic drop. Oh gosh, that's so old. No one does mic drops anymore. But anyways, I digress. You have to be so in touch with your soul so that you don't fall for things like that. Because what happens is when someone tries to talk you into doing something or believing something and your soul is saying, hold up, you know this isn't right, but they're so convincing that you follow them anyway, that you follow their ideas, slowly and surely, you start to silence the voice of your soul's wisdom and you replace it with the beliefs and the talking points. I want to say garbage, so I'm just going to say the garbage of other people. And so then you end up having these toxic spiritual ideas that you've been tricked into believing are deep and profound. And that starts to shape your life and your path as opposed to why you were originally here. And I do believe that in large, that is what has happened with Charlie. And so when he gets to the end of this life review, he's going to notice that. He's going to think about how he wants to relive life. And he's going to feel like he needs to maybe correct some of the long withstanding damage that he did, because his life and death has had an impact, and there might be ideas that continue to flow and gain speed because of him that he now realizes is wrong. So he could come back. I mean, a lot of people come back. He will definitely reincarnate. He may come back to actually fight those ideas and to be an advocate for things that are, I want to say, just and righteous, because he's been woken up on the other side, or he's about to wake up. And again, it's going to be through years of lived experience in the lives of people he affected. And so when he reincarnates, however that happens, whenever it happens, he's going to be a different person. He's still going to be a fighter, a debater most likely, but he's going to be fighting and debating for different things, far different things. And when he comes back, I don't think he's going to be a handsome, wealthy, influential person. I think he's going to have less resources, far less resources than he did in this last life. And he's gonna learn through grit and resilience and other resources how to fight the ideas that he was spreading. And I don't like the word fight, but maybe how to turn them around. So he's always going to be articulate. You know, there's always going to be a part of him that is able to use words to convince people. You know, that is one of his spiritual gifts. And I don't know what spiritual gift that would be, but it is something he will always take with him. It is something he will always have. So now, as in his next life, as someone who's maybe not attractive and doesn't have access to wealth, but has access to other things, other resources, he will take that gift of being able to speak and allowing people to, you know, to listen, to hear, and he will use it in a different way. And he will use it for essentially a different purpose, a different mission, one that is going to be more about unity and less about division. So that'll be years and years from now. And it's not going to be, and that's not something he's going to do immediately after he gets out of his life review. When he gets out of his life review, he will be rejoined with his family. He will experience heaven as heaven will be for him, you know, because everyone kind of has a different corner of heaven that they kind of decorate through their own thoughts. You know, for one person, heaven could be living by a beach. For another person, heaven could be living on Mars. But wherever you are, there's always a good community. You're always healthy. You know, there's just so much that you can experience in what is essentially the afterlife. It's not really heaven, but that's, I don't know what else to call it. So So he will experience his version of heaven with his friends, with his family. When his kids cross over, he'll be there for that. I also see a dog. I guess he had a dog at some point. So he'll be reunited with them. He'll have some adventures. He will continue to connect with Jesus. But I also see him meeting up with other masters and really seeing how wide and huge the universe is. And he will experience love as love. He will experience love as love. So when he gets to the other side, he goes through the life review. He realizes the impact he's had on other people. He'll have a different understanding of what eternal and unconditional love is. And he will feel that essence of God-like love within him. And it is when he feels fully integrated with that universal love that is available for all of us, that we can return to when we pass away, that he will eventually come back to earth and begin a new life with a different mission, which was, if I understand correctly, essentially the mission he was supposed to be on before, but he allowed other things like wealth, fame, all the things to get in the way. And that's okay. I mean, we're all human. I know some people listening to this are probably like, but it's not okay. And I get it. I understand. I mean, there are some actions that people take that are inexcusable, right? Oh, and that's the other thing. He is going to he is going to replay the moment of his death and things leading up to that and all of the circumstances and things happening behind the scenes, because there are things I believe that happen behind the scenes that we haven't been made aware of yet. And in a few years, I think there's certain things that are going to come to light about his passing. And it's going to be interesting because it feels like there was more at play than what we're all being told by the media. And it's not the media's fault. Like, there's only certain things they're being told as well. So again, that'll be interesting. So he's learning about all of it. I do genuinely hope this was helpful. Maybe it'll help you to think about the direction of your life and how you want to start living life now, because you don't have to wait for death to recognize your mistakes, and you don't have to wait until death to stop and think about how your actions and words and influence are affecting other people. You can take a look at those things now and make corrections now if you so desire. And wouldn't it be amazing to get to the other side and relive all the experiences that you had with other people and recognize that most of the influence that you put out there was actually pretty good? That would be amazing, right? So maybe we could all do our best to make that our mission, within reason, of course, because we can't make everyone happy, right? But we can always do our best to make the world a better place. We can do our best to stand up for what we know is right and to spread kindness, compassion, understanding, and empathy to a world that really needs it. So thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.